Hi, my name is Kate and I am on week 23 of long COVID. And today is all about mobility aids for long COVID and perhaps other chronic illnesses. So if you are asking the question, should I use a mobility aid? Could I use a mobility aid? The answer is probably yeah. Using a mobility aid is pretty recent for me. Not something that I had experienced before getting sick back in January. But I am particularly grateful to YouTubers like Jessica Kellgren-Fozard, Chronically Jenny, Annie Elaney, and Eleanor Brown, whose videos I've watched again and again as I started to sort of bring myself to sort of the sense that if I wanted to leave the house, I was not able to do it safely on my own 2 feet, and my world was getting pretty darn small. So if I wanted to have sort of a bigger sense of the world, if I wanted to be out and about and living my life the way I feel called to do, that mobility aids could be an incredible tool to do so. And I'll credit as well on Instagram the hashtags babe with a mobility aid and different aids for different days, and more about that in a little bit. But as much as I would love to say that my first time using a mobility aid came from a place of deep love and self-acceptance, that would not be true. My first time using mobility aid came from a place of deep and incandescent rage, which can be an excellent motivator should you need it. So the first time I used mobility aid, I had been sick for a few months. I had mostly been in bed. Every time I would get up to make like a cup of tea or go downstairs, my heart rate would rocket up to the 140s and 150s, and I would feel dizzy and faint and need to sit down. So I wasn't really getting out much, if at all. And that fateful Tuesday was election day in our village. And on the docket for that particular election were a number of school board candidates who were COVID pandemic deniers, who basically said, COVID isn't real, our children shouldn't need to wear masks, and running on that particular platform. And here I was, mostly stuck in bed because of my COVID, because of first COVID, then COVID pneumonia, and then long COVID. And just imagining the harm that could be done in our community by a more rampant spread of COVID, especially in our schools. And I knew that there was no way, even though I didn't really know how I was gonna make it to the voting booth, there was no way that I could stay home and not make my voice heard. So I got in the car and I drove to my polling place, and I make it to the front desk, and lo and behold, there is a whole bank of wheelchairs. Thanks be to God, so grateful that they were provided. And I said, I want one of those. And they're like, oh, like, do you need it for a loved one? I said, no, it's for me. And I had a wonderful volunteer who helped me navigate the my registration process and getting my ballot and finding an accessible desk for me to fill it out, and to be able to be heard as a citizen, as a person in this community who is deeply concerned about the health and well-being of others, who doesn't want anyone to go through what I've been going through the last 6 months. And which millions of Americans are now dealing with. If there was any way that I could stop that, I wanted to make that possible. And for me, mobility aids made that possible. A trip out to vote, which would have taken literally all of my spoons for the next 3 days, took about maybe a quarter as many. And it was in that moment that I thought, mobility aids could allow me to live my life so much more fully than I'm currently able to do so. And what an incredible expression of freedom to be able to go out into the world and do the things I love and be part of conversations that matter to me. And if I need some extra tools to do so, great, they're just extra tools. So it was at that point that I started to think about what kind of mobility aid would make sense for me. The wheelchair for voting was really helpful, but for me, it was more knowing that I could sit down if I needed to. So with my tachycardia, because of the dysautonomia that the COVID caused, being able to sit down and bring my heart rate back down to a safe level whenever it started to spike, versus needing to be sitting down at all times. So something like a cane that would give me a little extra balance, a little extra support so that walking wasn't quite so much work, but also something that had a seat. And I threw out a bunch of different ideas and talked with my doctor and physical therapist and friends about, would a rollator make sense? Would a cane make sense? And I just sort of thought, like, this isn't quite what I need. What I really need is a cane with a seat. And I just brought this idea up to a good friend of mine who happens to be a historian. And she said, "Have you heard about the cane seats from the World's Fair?" And she brought up this video, and lo and behold, there were these super nifty sort of wooden carved cane seats that they use at the World's Fair in the early 20th century, where it was sort of a 3-footed stool that folded up to be a cane and then folded down and you could sit on it. Wow, that is exactly what I'm looking for. But they were made to be for people who are slightly taller than my 5'3" frame, and given that they were historical artifacts, I didn't feel great about chopping the feet off of one to make it more appropriate for my height. So I started searching on places, of course, where do you find anything you could possibly need? Amazon. So went on Amazon, and there were some things that were more helpful than others. There were sort of these cane seats where they were one stick with sort of a handle that folded down to become a chair, but I really wanted that sort of 3-legged stool, something that would be a little bit more stable, especially if I was feeling a little dizzy, a little woozy, and like I needed that really sturdy place to sit. And on Amazon, I found what I have been sitting on through this entire chat, which is my CaneStool. This is my CaneStool. You can see that it has lovely 3 feet with little safe grippies on the bottom. It's height adjustable for people between 4'11" and 6'3", very handy. You can see that mine is on the short setting. And then it has this wonderful textured seat that folds down, and you're meant to sit on it so that the grippy handle is facing front, so that way you can hold onto the handle for a little bit of extra stability. I have sat on it the other way, and that works fine. It's just a little bit less stable. And then when you don't need to sit down, you just pull up the seat and it clicks into place and is a cane. I paid about $45 for this on Amazon. There's a few different companies that make them, but they're all basically the same, so I think they're all produced in the same place. This one is by Yade Care. I actually have 2 of these CaneStools, because if you have a chronic condition that leads to executive dysfunction, you'll probably lose your CaneStool. If you were like me, I was picking up our dog from an event and got her in the car and left my CaneStool on the side of the car. And now it has gone on a wonderful adventure all throughout New England. It has been to Maine and Connecticut and Massachusetts, and hopefully it will be eventually coming back. So that CaneStool, Persephone, is decorated with cherry blossom stickers, and this is Hades. I am not a big Greek mythology nerd per se, but I do really love the webcomic lore Olympus, and reread through the entire canon while I was mostly in bed. So the image of those two characters has just been really lovely to have with me. And there is something to be said to me with my cane stools about walking through the underworld and finding new life. So Hades is decorated with firefly stickers, and they all also have this lovely flashlight. I'm not going to shine it right in your eyes, but a wonderful flashlight which can guide your way if you're in dim lighting. For me, I'm all about living out loud and making anything a little extra fabulous. So I decided to bedazzle all of my cane stools. So I just ordered transparent stickers off of Redbuuble. They have an incredible array of artists and makers, so you can really find something that's personal to you and the story that you want to tell with your mobility aid. And I just really love that it feels like me, and it tells a story that's meaningful to me, that helps bring a little bit of extra joy in using something that maybe I hadn't imagined before, but has certainly brought me extra freedom, mobility, and opportunity. So I'm really, really grateful to be able to use these cane stools. They have certainly widened my radius of exploration in these days. And I will say, when I first started using them, I was really nervous about like, oh my goodness, what are people gonna say? What are people gonna think? Every piece of feedback I have gotten about these cane stools has been positive. No exaggeration. Every time I go out, every time I go to the doctors, or just out and about in town, people say, that is amazing. That is such a cool cane, because it is, obviously. But people are just so excited to see an option that is creative, that is kind of the best of both worlds, both cane and stool. And the number of people who said, I really need something like that, or oh my gosh, I've been looking for something that I can use to walk and then sit down on, that's a little bit smaller and more portable than a rollator. That's perfect. And I think so often when we're worried about what people will say, what people will think about anything that we do around disability, there's certainly plenty of ableism in the world, but by being out in the world, by using mobility aids with pride, we give other people permission to use the aids that they might need, that maybe they might be embarrassed or don't even know to ask for yet. And how incredible to give the gift to others of that freedom, of that mobility, of that chance to get out and explore. So, from my long COVID journey to yours, from my cane stools and I, happy travels. Take good care, everybody.